as we continue to keep a very close eye on what is taking place in the emerging market space, the question we hear so often is investors are wondering, can you get in here and buy on the dips, or is it too early?
It's a very good question. I wish I could give you an absolute answer on that. Suffice to say that, probably at the beginning of August, there would have been a sense of feeling that the EM to DM spread, or more likely the EM to US spread, was wide enough and the EMs looked attractive. But by the end of August, if you had been long US stocks, you've returned 3.7%. If you're long emerging market through the emerging market index, you're down 2.7%. So that spread's widened quite a lot. And it makes it difficult to see whether it's actually going to end in the short term. And a lot of this is momentum driven as opposed to fundamentals. The emerging market space are stronger fundamentally than they were in previous crises around emerging markets, but unfortunately momentum has an amazing way of disregarding reality to a large extent. And so this crisis, if you will, and probably a bit early to call it a crisis, is starting to grab some momentum, and particularly out of the northern summer. As people start to come back to work, they'll start to look at this, and that fear of contagion will start to maybe accelerate a little bit.
Toby, and when you talk about this momentum trade, then some may say seek out the pockets where perhaps the idiosyncratic factors aren't looking so ugly. I mean, we look at what's happened to the rupiah, right, in Indonesia, and some say, look, overall, though, the economic fundamentals are so different from what you're seeing in the likes of, say, in Argentina. Are you willing to kind of play that divergence?
So that's an interesting one, whether you look at emerging markets separately between geographical regions. So if you look at Central America versus Asia, Asia benefits, I think, by China being a very good anchor to the region in an economic sense. And of course, Indonesia, Philippines, Thailand, Malaysia probably benefit somewhat by being anchored close to China. So if you're looking for a relative value trade, maybe emerging market Asia versus emerging market Americas and in Africa might be a better option. So there is potentially some opportunities there based on individual countries or individual regions.
Let's talk a little bit more about those individual countries. I'm here in Egypt, Toby, and I have to ask you, I mean, at the end of the day, there's been so much progress here inside the country in terms of really trying to get this economy back on track. Of course, some 40% of Egyptians still living on as much as $2 a day, and the government's still pushing ahead with these major infrastructure projects that they're hoping are going to really galvanize growth and really bring the private sector back to investing. But if you look at it in terms of making the emerging market case, this was the darling of the emerging markets last year right here in Egypt. Do you think that this would still be a safe bet going forward, even with that debt to GDP ratio?
Well, again, it comes down to where you want to put your money. And at the moment, it looks to me like investors are quite happy to put their money into the United States. Despite the escalation of trade conflict with China, the economy is going extremely well, and US stocks are, well and truly on the tear. And hence, if you're looking for the next 3 to 6 months, you're probably more inclined to be out of EM or relatively underweight EM to US stocks or US assets. So regardless of whether the fundamentals are in favour, it's where investors want to park their money. And at the moment, given the risk-off associated with emerging markets, it's difficult to say, look, let's stick our money and leave it in an emerging market because the fundamentals are there if I want to get a return over the next 3 to 6. And if I have a long-term player, you can stick your money and leave them in EMs and you're probably going to do fine. But, it depends your investment horizon. And of course, investors get very nervous when there's a bit of a risk-off on.
Hey everybody, it's Hadley Gamble from our new CNBC Middle East Bureau in Abu Dhabi. Thanks for stopping by. Now to watch more, you can try one of the videos that just popped up on your screen. And don't forget to subscribe.